truly an incredible honor and privilege to go behind the bima to have a conversation with you, Douglas Murray, a hero. I think of decent people, moral people everywhere, but particularly over the last 9 months of the Jewish people and people who love Israel. So before anything else, aside from gratitude for this conversation, from the bottom of my heart, as someone who has both of my siblings live in Israel, I have a nephew fighting in Rafah right now and nephews who are serving in the IDF and other capacities. Thank you for your steadfast support and your moral clarity and your articulately speaking the truth to power. And from the bottom of our hearts, thank you.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you for such a warm introduction. It's a great pleasure to be with you again.
It is great to be again. I want to thank our mutual dear friend, Evan, for making this conversation possible and that night possible. Recently, you, Ben Shapiro, Evan, and I had an extended dinner, and I had a front row seat to incredible dialogue, conversation, back and forth. Really, really remarkable. And here's the thing that really jumped out at me, Douglas, was here I'm sitting with Ben Shapiro, a fellow observant Jew, Evan, an informed fellow traditional Jew. We have a long-standing friendship and history. We're Jews passionately connected to and caring about Israel. And in that conversation, you're a total insider. Here you are, not of the Jewish faith and not of a Jewish background. Your knowledge about Israel, your seeming passion, commitment to Israel is as strong as ours. So tell us, where does that come from? Where does it come from, this support of Israel? Is it something in your upbringing? Was there a teacher, a family member, a mentor? Is this philosophical, religious in nature, cultural? Where does this incredible passion, commitment to Israel come from?
I think it's probably quite a lot of things. It starts definitely with what I regard as being a starting ground for everything, which is orienting towards truth. And as the first time I was in Israel was 2006 during the Lebanon war, the Hezbollah war. And I was very struck then by the simple, differences, to put it mildly, the chasm between what I was seeing with my own eyes and what I was reading in the international press. It just blew my mind that there could be such a disconnect and such terrible misreporting and non-reporting and much more. So that definitely sort of gave me a taste and a hunger for the story. And then I suppose just over the years, I've spent quite a lot of time there in war and in peacetime. And that sort of feeling that Israel has there's such a lack of empathy in most of the West for what it's going through, what its people are going through. And I also, there's lots of other things. I suppose I'm, very aware of history, was certainly brought up to know my history and to know that it's not something you sort of study for a bit and then sort of think, oh, I've done that. And sort of always learning and always wanting to learn more, and feeling that certainly philosophically and religiously at times, I felt a deep connection to the state of Israel, and just a great sympathy for the struggles of its people, and an admiration for it as well. It's not just about, victimhood or something, an admiration for, this extraordinary country, which is, as we know, is the one bit of the Middle East not blessed with oil. And yet, this country that's relatively young has become this huge success story. And I suppose, over time, you have lots of friends and others in the country, and you hear all their sides of the stories. And before you know it, I find myself able to argue as well as anyone at a Friday night dinner.
I'm sure. And you have an open invitation to any of ours. You'd be a eager participant. One of the things that's so frustrating as someone who loves Israel is, like you said, your curiosity and your quest to learn, which is part of who you are, brought you looking objectively at the history and at the current facts and the political landscape and so on. And you came to what seemed to be the obvious conclusions. And it leaves all of us wondering, how can the world not see what's obvious? Certainly the last 9 months in this war, the moral cause that Israel is fighting, and the moral clarity, maybe the most moral army in history, the most moral war, taking precautions no other army in history has, and the ratios of civilian deaths and all the truths that I certainly don't need to tell you, you've spoken them out so incredibly compellingly. Why, if anyone is looking objectively, how could they not come to the same conclusion? And therefore, our conclusion can only be the bias that's out there and the filter through which everyone is interpreting and projecting this story and this war.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things, but might as well go to the root, as I see it, which is that after 9/11 in America, there was enormous international horror and some sympathy. But there was also an underlying thing that certain people, in that case, mainly on the left, also felt. It was rather disgustingly given voice by the classicist Mary Beard, who said in the London Review of Books that, sad as 9/11 was, you couldn't get out of your mind the feeling that in some way America had it coming.
Mm.
Now, that was, for some of us, deeply shocking. As some of us like me, who love America, but fell in love with America the first time I visited in the 90s. For us, that was just a horrible thing. But it was what she felt, and clearly what a lot of other people felt. America's been too dominant, or America's thrown its power around too much. So, it's not to say they support the attacks, but they sort of say, well, you can see it coming. They had it coming. I think there's a very strong similar strain of thought in much of the West about Israel, a sort of feeling that Israel has done something wrong. And therefore, even after an atrocity like the atrocities of October the 7th, they sort of had it coming. You reap what you sow, that kind of thing. And I think this is a really important prejudice, and not just a prejudice, but also, to give the benefit of the doubt, a deep misunderstanding that many people have, which is that Israel has done something wrong, which means that, and at a very fundamental level, not just occasional policies or mistakes, but at some fundamental level. I mean, after all, Israel is the only country I know of in the world who, when its government does something that somebody else disapproves of, the entire viability and legitimacy of the state is called into question.
Right.
I quite often make the comparison with Pakistan, founded within this, a year of the foundation of the State of Israel. Pakistan's been run by some of the most terrible people. But at no stage does anyone in the West say, well, I think basically we should abolish the state of Pakistan, or return to the pre-1947 borders. Or, I mean, it would be preposterous. And yet with Israel, that's the sort of thing that's always on the table. And I think because of this belief that many people have that Israel did something wrong at the foundation. I deny that. I refute that. I argue against that. But I think a lot of people feel that and put every atrocity against Israel somehow into that immoral equation.
It's sort of a punishment for being successful. When we were the underdog, people could like us, right? People love Dead Jews, that recent work. And now that there's some success in medicine and technology and so on, people hate success, which is so deeply troubling. Yes. So you've earned enormous admiration and fans and people are deeply appreciative, including me, including the State of Israel. The president gave you an award in April, well deserved. Has it also cost you friendships, family members? You're standing up, you're being such a staunch advocate for Israel. Have you been surprised in this world in which people sort of think they're siding with the underdog to have sympathy for Gaza and to see Israel as an aggressor? You're being so staunchly in Israel's corner. Has that harmed you in any way you didn't expect, or cost you anything?
Firstly, I wouldn't care, which is important. Secondly, I think anyone who, was on the wrong side of this very important question, I think I successfully ditched some years ago. Probably 25 years ago now. So no, I don't feel that. There are some critics of mine on the political right who try to smear me because, they can't believe that anyone who's not Jewish would be pro-Israel and would love to think that this is because I'm sort of bought or something by Israel. I regret to inform people that I've never received.
There wasn't a multi-million-dollar check that came with that award from President Herzog?
I wish. Yeah. But no, I mean, So there are people like that who I mainly think are sort of bad faith actors who, want to justify their own bigotries. But no, I think in my experience, and perhaps for anyone younger watching, this is quite important. My experience in general is, if you tell the truth as you see it, it doesn't really matter because what happens, because you might lose friends, I suppose. As I say, in my case, I shed them many years ago. But the best thing is you get a lot much better friends. And for me, one of the great wonderful things actually that's come out of this horror has been the love and appreciation that I felt from so many people, particularly in Israel. And it's deeply, deeply moving to me, because what I think people often have said to me is, thank you for what you're saying and what you're doing, and it's encouraged me. And I would say to them, but you saying that encourages me in return. It's a loop of it's how would you say it? If you give, you get back, and I find that there's just an enormous amount of support and love, and that's meant a huge amount to me and encourages me in turn.
Are you concerned if you shed friends who disagree and embrace the people who support and laud, then a person can find themselves in an echo chamber?
Oh, sure. But I mean, I don't think there's any chance of me being in an echo chamber, because I spend far too much time debating my
Yeah.
enemies. And so I do. I mean, you definitely have to make sure you're not surrounded by sycophants.
Right.
That's always the case. But that I don't think I'd like that anyway. No, I mean, I suppose there's a possibility. I find that what's one of the things that's very interesting about the last 8 months is that, and it's something I've written about, that I sometimes worry about, isn't being in an echo chamber, but that a society could reach a very different conclusion than the rest of the world. And I think that's one thing that is in danger of happening in Israel. The knowledge inside Israel of what has happened, not just on the 7th and since, but long way back, is extremely deep and widespread. And outside, I don't know if the dial has shifted so much. And when I say the dial shifting, what I really mean is, for instance, 2 days after the 7th of October, I think it was Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, this is why we need to double down on the two-state solution. I don't think there's anyone in Israel who thinks that. I mean, there's always one guy, but after the horrors, after handing Gaza over in 2005 and ripping Jewish families out of their homes to give the whole of the Gaza over to the Palestinians, and then Hamas being elected, and then the rockets, and then the rockets and rockets and rockets, and then the 7th. I don't think anyone in Israel thinks that the response to that should be to give the Palestinians yet another state. But the rest of the world's stuck on this sort of October the 6th stupid paradigm. And I do worry about that when you mention echo chambers. That's not an echo chamber. That's just some people have had reality catch up with them, and some are able to kind of continue to dream defunct dreams.
Let me ask you this question, actually, because I think it comes out. Is you're describing some people are so invested and such stakeholders of their ideas and ideologies, it's very hard to break from them, even when the truth and the reality and the clarity is in the other direction. How have you tried to avoid that, as somebody who reads and who grows and who learns and who was wanting to improve? How do you sort of check yourself between when you are stuck on an old idea but should be open to revising it, versus when that old idea is such truth that it's not open to revision or to change?
Well, one way I tried, it's funny, a friend of mine in Paris, I was speaking to the other day, and I mentioned certain French writers and intellectuals whose books I'd been reading recently, and I was catching up on the latest developments in France, in politics and literature and philosophy. And it was very funny. This friend of mine said, because some of them are very left wing and some of them are people I would not inevitably agree with, but this friend said, I'm sort of surprised. He said, do you think any of them read you? I said, oh no, of course not. Of course not. uh, and I've often found that that isn't reciprocated.
Mm.
People who disagree with you from certain directions, not just politically, tend to think, "Oh, I know what he says. I know what he says." I, by contrast, always try to think, "I'll just check in on what they're saying. I'll see what's going on there." And usually, there's something to take away that's of interest. Not always, but sometimes. So I suppose that's one of the ways I do it. I read all the time books and articles and reports by people I disagree with, and I wouldn't have it any other way. John Stuart Mill, the famous author of On Liberty, says that one of the foundational reasons why free speech and freedom of the press is so important is that even if your own opinion is in error, if your own opinion is in error, then you should try to make sure you correct it. I do, but as I say, I'm amazed by the number of people who would rather stay in error.
There's industries surrounding it. People draw
Oh, yeah.
livelihoods from it, and there's financial gains to maintain certain ideas that should be relegated to the past. What people look at the Israel issue, they might look at you and they say, of course, this is where he is on immigration. This is where he is on this subject. He's a conservative. He's a this, he's a that. So of course he's standing up for Israel in this war. How would you explain to people that support for Israel should transcend politics? It's not a left or right, liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat. That support for Israel is an American cause, a British cause, a cause of the West, a moral cause. How would you communicate that?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, what Israel is doing in warfare at the moment is something that America and Britain have had to do in recent years. The destruction of ISIS, very similar to the hopeful destruction of Hamas. You couldn't eradicate ISIS completely, but you could make it effectively operationally incapable and destroy it to such an extent that it could not carry out attacks like that terrible night of attacks in Paris 8 years ago. The Western powers, the Allies who went in to destroy ISIS, were fighting on similar laws of war, rules of war that the IDF is at the moment. And the IDF is fighting a much tougher campaign actually than ISIS was. There's more house-to-house combat. And we had the Kurdish, very brave Kurdish fighters helping us with ISIS. But I think people don't realize quite often when they apply these, what I call the triple standards to Israel, which is you don't like just a double standard, but the triple standard of that Israel has to be better. The IDF has to be better than any other Western army. It has to be not just the most moral, but even more moral than anyone has ever conceived of. This is, I think, a big mistake because we will all have to fight wars again at some point. I mean, unless we've entered the age of Aquarius, which I think we haven't and never will. And so it's a very poor idea to decide to defame the Israeli military for things that young British men and young American men will have to fight in due course. Lots of other aspects to that. I mean, I'm very critical of the stupid International Criminal Court, the ICC, and its self-appointed pompous lead prosecutor who is just a political activist, and it's disgraceful. But some people, including the new Foreign Secretary of the UK, David Lammy, think that the ICC is what it says it is and that everyone should abide by its claims. Well, if you agree with this trumped up pseudo court having jurisdiction over democratically elected Israeli leaders, which is what they're trying to do by issuing arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant. Yeah, well, wait till they come for you, because at some point, probably in the next 5 years in the Labour government, certainly in the next 10 years, if they have a rolling majority, British troops are bound to be involved somewhere. And David Lammy better hope that there isn't some nasty judge out there who, for political reasons, wants to come for British or American troops, because he will be in the dock next.
Right.
These people are ridiculously short-sighted. But it's not just that. It's also, of course, I mean, it's just a defense of values. If you look at a region, like looking in a room of people, you look for the friendly faces. You look for the ones who, you're going to get on with. Well, Israel is obviously the country in the region which America and Britain and European countries are most likely to get on with. The litany of ways in which we're similar is so commonplace that it's a cliche now. But there are many interesting and important dynamics in the rest of the region, but nowhere else where an American or European would be able to be recognizably at home. And so, of course, you should defend people who share your values. Of course, you should defend your friends when they're fighting for their values and for yours as well. I find it very sad when people think that it is a right-left issue. I think that it needn't be. It didn't used to be. I think it was made so in, the lifetimes of people currently alive.
I think it's evident even from the countless rallies, the rallies for Israel, Americans for Israel. There are always American flags being waved, and there's the singing the Star Spangled Banner. And at all the pro-Palestinian or essentially pro-Hamas, it's hard to believe that they're even pro-Hamas, that people would associate with Hamas. They're burning American flags, and so it should be so evident and obvious to political leaders or to the masses with whom to align. And the equivalent on the other side, on 9/11 in Israel, there's a 9/11 memorial in Israel. And a 9/11 in Gaza, they were handing out candies and shooting fireworks. So these simple facts should be obvious to all where we are aligned.
What you mentioned about the flag is so important. I gave an alternative commencement address to some of the students of Columbia University earlier this year because their commencement was stopped because of Hamasnik supporters who were going to probably anyway, the point is that during this alternative commencement speech, where there were Jewish students, Christian students, and others, I spoke to a lovely young man who had been in the American military and had gone to Columbia after serving. And he showed me the photographs and the press coverage. But at one point, when these Hamas idiots were pro-Hamas idiots were protesting in the encampment in Columbia in New York, he went in their midst waving the American flag. And was immediately hauled off campus, described as provocative, and was in some danger. And as he said to me, I've fought and lost friends for this flag, for the American flag, and I'm told I can't wave it in New York at a university because it's too provocative. Well, something's telling that I should tell people something. Not just about Israel. It's about America. It's not just about hatred of Israel. It's about hatred of America, hatred of our societies, and a desire, an extraordinary desire to support anyone who hates us. And they often say that it's a job for a psychiatrist to analyze some of this.
I'm sure it is. I mentioned to you when we spent time together with Ben that one of the outstanding things about both you and Ben is not only your brilliant minds and not only your incredible knowledge of history and philosophy, but put into settings of debate, because there are a lot of brilliant minds out there. There are a lot of people who know a lot and they can't communicate effectively whatsoever. They have no oratory skills. The two of you not only have the background and the insight and the knowledge and the writing, but you put you on a debate stage and you make mincemeat of your opponents. You have an incredible skill set to be able. It's advantage that you both have, that the truth's on your side. That's a sizable advantage. It's like taking steroids in a debate. But on the other hand, it still takes enormous skill to be able to. So how do you decide when by agreeing to a debate, will you have a platform to articulate the truth, and when are you somehow giving credibility to the other side and it's demeaning to even appear with them? And I think it's a big question for Israelis in particular. They're invited on news shows, or there are other panelists, and they have to ask themselves, if I don't participate, our point of view won't be shared. If I do participate, am I elevating people who shouldn't even have a platform or a voice whatsoever? How do you decide that?
Yeah, I remember there was a wonderful Israeli professor who was on Al Jazeera some years ago, and celebrated performance, magnificent performance in Arabic. And when I met him some years later, I said, "Gosh, you're such a hero of mine." That debate on Al Jazeera really made an impression on me. It showed how you can just bulldoze through and say the truth, even if the other guests and the presenter and the network want you not to do so. And he said something so funny to me. He said, "Douglas, what can I say? Sometimes Al Jazeera invites a Jew on as a punching bag, and sometimes the bag punches back.
Mm.
And and I mean, it is a concern, and it is one that you weigh up all the time. There are people who say, debate me, and are just people I don't think have any significance. And one way in which I sort of judge that is, show me your body of work in this area. Like, what are the books you've written, or the articles, or what's your first-hand research? Where's your journalism on this? And if that person has done none of that and is just another gobby person, I don't feel very inclined to debate them. Occasionally, somebody will be brought on a program with me who I think very little of, but believe they've got a bit too big for their boots. And I think that was the case with, there's a guy called Cenk Uygur, who is not a thoughtful person at all, and he's just a lazy guy and a obnoxious guy. And I was invited on Piers Morgan to debate him, and we did. But when I was asked to again, I said, no, I don't need to do that again. I've said what I have to say to that fool, and move on. But I think probably there are very, very few people that I say no to. And I suppose just I say no probably more now than I did at the start of my career, for many reasons. But one of them is also, it's really quite morally tainting. It feels demeaning to be on with certain people. Like, if somebody didn't accept that October the 7th had happened, I would have no need for them, because I'd assume they also don't believe in the moon landings, believe that 9/11 was an inside job of George W. Bush, and
the world is flat.
The world is flat. I just don't have. You've got to use your time on this earth wisely, and I don't think that's a wise use of my time. And also, those people sometimes bring out some of my less positive sides, which
that's the most fun side.
Well,
that's exciting.
Maybe for other people, but it has a toll on me.
I'm sure it does. Are there tactics when you're planning, when you're preparing for those debates, those conversations? Obviously, the average person, doesn't have that platform or that audience, but we do engage people all the time where we're trying to make the case for Israel. So what are some of the tactics you think are the most important when making the case for Israel, or the case for any truth? What's the most, I don't mean a debate tactic as if there's the judges who are scoring, but I just mean to be effective or compelling. What are the most important tools to think about?
I mean, the most important, of course, as you mentioned, is truth, and sticking to that. Being unafraid to say unpopular things is very important. It's important not to be knocked off your balance, which is like in the boxing ring, as I understand it, what people very often try to do to get you down on the floor. You've got to stick to your guns and be willing to go back to the first principles, the basics. I think a lot of debate in private and in public, people get lost because I sometimes describe it as bollards are thrown in front of them, and they end up having to sort of weave around the bollards carefully, and they forget where they're meant to be going. And there's a lot of people who do that tactic. I was doing monk debates with the wonderful Natasha Hausdorff on my side in Toronto the other week, and our opponents there repeatedly tried to just throw absolute rubbish in our way, claim after claim that was completely false. And you have to decide, and it's that there is a certain art in that. Natasha has it in spades, of deciding which of those things you are going to clear from your way, and which you're just going to have to say, look, there's been so much thrown in our way that I'm going to move on. And she's a master of that, and that is a very important thing to be able to do, because if you do get thrown off and end up arguing some niche bit of it, then you're away from the point. And Ben is superb at that as well, of not being blown off course. I suppose, everyone should know as much as possible. And the main thing is, yeah, remembering the evidence of your own eyes. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I do so much sort of first-hand reporting and seeing. I think that the best way to avoid being blown off course is by seeing things with your own eyes and seeing as much as possible with your own eyes. And that gives you that inner strength to know that even if somebody is lying to your face, you will not lose sight of it because it's in your mind, in your mind's eye. And yeah, there's a lot to say, but I think that's some of it for sure. Yeah.
That's enormously. You've been generous with your time. I won't take too much more of it. How is Douglas Murray misunderstood? What do you wish the world do more about you to better appreciate you? Does it bother you? Critics, criticism. How do you develop a thick skin? Earlier, you said, that you've shed those friends, or you don't really care the people who don't get it. There are advantages. There's some disadvantages to developing skin that's too thick, just as a person. So how do you navigate that? What do you wish we better appreciated or understood, and how do you not take to heart too much any criticism the more of a public person you become?
I don't listen to criticism from the way I think of it is I listen to criticism from critics who wish me well, but I won't listen to criticism from people who hate me.
Mm.
And I've run that process for a long time. As I like to say, if my mother said to me, "I thought you were too angry," in that debate or whatever, I would listen because she's my mother. I know she wants the best for me. If some maniac in the street comes gibbering over at me and screams abuse at me and then offers some debate tips, I'm not likely to listen to them. And I think we all have to remember that there are critics who want you to do well and they're trying to improve you, and there are others who just hate you.
Right.
And most of the stuff that is so-called criticism is just people who hate you or hate the things you stand for. I don't care for their opinions at all. I mean, why would I? It's like going over to a mad, deranged drug addict on the street and asking them what they think of your tie. I mean, it's you have to listen to people who you respect, and I certainly have quite a lot of people from a very wide range of backgrounds and disciplines and viewpoints actually, who I really do listen when they talk, and yeah, I think that keeps you sane and grounded, I think.
For those who are appreciative of all that you do and are fans of yours, would they show it more when they see you in public? If you're in New York, if you're in a restaurant, if you're traveling, if you're in Israel, do they show their appreciation by staying away and just saying, "Hey, there's Douglas Murray, he's fantastic," or by coming over and saying thank you for all that you do? Do you wish you had more privacy?
People come over to me a lot. It's very moving. It's very, very moving. It's almost always so nice, and it's very moving. I mean, I'm a writer and journalist, and what you always hope is that your ideas, your work is read and absorbed, and to realize that you are being read and absorbed is just it's a wonderful thing, a wonderful thing. So no, it's I regard it as an enormous privilege, and I don't take it for granted at all.
What are 3 books you'll leave our audience recommending, not only on Israel, the Israel issue, but if somebody wants to be well-read, thoughtful, curious, growing, are there 3 books? I know that's a very broad question because I'm not even mentioning a genre or an area, but what are books that in your mind you cannot be a thoughtful, intellectual person without having read? If you could gift 3 books, what would be those books aside from yours?
I'd say aside from mine, I suppose there are. I read novels as well as nonfiction. So I might just stick with novels. I would say Anna Karenina, The Leopard by Giuseppe de Lampedusa, and Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman. Tolstoy, Lampedusa, and Grossman. That's a good start.
All right, we're gonna head right to Amazon. Thank you for your time. I have to say the South Florida community is incredibly excited. September 8th, this was a short conversation, but we'll have the opportunity to hear you more long form, your first ever U.S. tour with Live Nation coming to the Parker in Fort Lauderdale. And I know tickets have just gone on sale, not even publicly yet, but starting to spread around more privately. Our community is incredibly excited, and my family, I am excited to be able to see you again there. September 8th, everybody should jump online to get those tickets before they sell out, because I know walk away better informed and more excited and more grateful for all that you're doing for Israel and beyond. So, Douglas, you're really a hero to our people, for the Jewish people and the pro-Israel community. This last 9 months has been increasingly lonely in this world, and it just compounds the loss, the pain, and the anxiousness over what will be is the loneliness. We know that for any form of struggle, loneliness only compounds it. And I think collectively, nationally, in the people sense, the Jewish people are lonely. You've helped us consistently feel less lonely by giving us a voice, by speaking out on our behalf, by standing up for Israel, by fighting back against anti-Semitism. So again, I'll end the way we began, just from the most sincere place in my heart, to thank you for all that you do, and that God should give you the continued strength and wisdom and oratory acumen to continue to defeat all of your enemies, our enemies, and to win not only in debates, in ideas, and to give you the strength to continue to spread that message and to stand up for us and to stand up for all truth. So we're looking forward to seeing you September 8th, and I hope everyone will join for that very special show. You're really a hero to our people in this time, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Well, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you and everyone watching in September.
Thanks for watching. Drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. Until next time, stay informed and inspired. This is Dejobnik signing off.